When was the last time the two of you spoke?
Oh, a couple of months ago. It was a couple of months ago. I had dealt with Lindsey a lot while I was ambassador to Turkey, particularly the effort to get Sweden into NATO. There were some things that Turkey wanted the U.S. Congress to do, and Lindsey was very effective in bringing that about. So we had a lot of discussions while he was in D.C. and I was in Turkey, and we've talked a few times since.
And he was effective, objectively, in trying to persuade the president repeatedly to keep the NATO alliance together, with the U.S. leading the way. The most recent NATO summit just last week also highlighted that push from Lindsey Graham. The president over the weekend, when he was speaking to a number of networks, including CNN, and talking and mourning about the passing of his friend, noted some of his brightest moments in his view, and one of them was when he said that the senator excoriated you during the Brett Kavanaugh hearings. It was in a committee room, it was in private, but he excoriated you for pushing for an FBI investigation into some of the claims of sexual abuse and violence. And then you said that same night, over dinner, he told you that you did the right thing. So tell us more about what that story says about who Lindsey Graham was.
Well, that was Lindsey. He's adaptable, and he was very much opposed to prolonging the investigation or to launching an FBI investigation. I felt strongly that we needed to do that, and he did go right after me in the committee room, and then in the anti-room, even louder, saying, you can't do this, you can't do this. But I did, and within a couple of hours, he was back at me saying, hey, that was the best thing ever, and let's go have dinner. And we did. And that was Lindsey. He adapted. He adapted to the Trump era, and he felt that he could influence the president. And as you mentioned, in particular, in terms of American leadership abroad, Lindsey has had a tremendous effect, I think, in keeping the NATO alliance together, making sure that American leadership, goes on in Europe. That's important.
Well, that adaptation that you just noted, he was really emblematic of the sort of arc that we saw with the Republican Party, and how initially there had been fierce criticism of Donald Trump when he set down that escalator at Trump Tower in 2015, announcing his bid for the presidency, to today. In fact, in 2015, Lindsey Graham said that the answer to making America great again was to tell Donald Trump to go to hell. He's changed quite a bit since then. Listen to the joke that he made just last month about the president.
I want to start with a bunch of thank yous. I want to thank the big guy, God. Trump comes later. Mr. President, you're not far behind God, but we're going to start with him.
And that was Lindsey Graham celebrating his primary win, again, just last month for a fifth term, seeking the Senate position there in South Carolina. Jonathan Martin of Politico writes this morning that what we saw was an example of a cynical capitulation, but maybe it was worth it, as you note, because that embrace of Donald Trump, while still maintaining his hawkish support for alliances, for fighting against Russia with sanctions, and for keeping the U.S. with NATO, that worked. Do you believe that this capitulation, if that's what it was worth it ultimately?
Well, I just say I couldn't do it. I'm not a good enough politician, apparently. But I was always glad that Lindsey was there. I always knew that he believed in strong American leadership. He believed in our alliances, and that he was influencing the president, and he did. So I can't speak to whether it's capitulation or not. I'm just glad he was there as long as he was.
Well, Lindsey Graham, to his credit, I guess, was very transparent when asked why the change, why was he constantly embracing the president, why was someone who was such an ardent critic become such a supporter. And he said that it came down to being relevant, that Donald Trump called him. They spoke frequently, even the hours apparently before his passing, that he played golf with him, that he made him feel important to be in the room. As you just noted, you were different. And we recall your speech on the Senate floor in 2017 when you said that you would not seek another term. You said, "I will not be complicit." And that ultimately cost your career. Watching how Lindsey Graham's story has ended now, do you ever wonder back about your own choice?
No, not at all. Not for a minute. I had to face my family, and I had said that I didn't agree with the president's policies and couldn't condone his behavior. And for me to just flip on a dime and say, hey, those policies I disagreed with, they're growing on me, or the president's behavior, I kind of like it now, I just couldn't do it. But I mean, there are, a couple of ways to influence. I don't pretend for a minute that I can have as much influence outside of the Senate. But I just couldn't turn on a dime and do that. I don't think I would have been effective at it, and I certainly wouldn't have slept well at night.